Over the course of the past week, it's been pretty busy but refreshing to jump back into what my life used to be with not only now more school on top of it, but also another job and going back to my first job that I ever had, which is in like the fast food kind of industry. But in a weird way, it feels refreshing in a sense more than it does busy and work because I'm so used to working with the same people that I used to work with before. Um, Now that I've stepped away, because I do think that sometimes you need a break from something in order to be able to see like the wider perspective, or just sometimes to take a step back. I think that there's intelligence and information and that you gain from viewing something up close, and I also think that there's intelligence and information within stepping back and viewing things from a wider perspective, and both bring its own sets of positives and negatives. But I think that the knowledge you gain from both is just equally as important as the other. And going back into it now that I realize how important it is to interact with the people, talk to them, um, do your job to your utmost ability. Because sometimes before, when I was 18, 19, I would think that it was okay to kind of just BS the whole thing. But now that I've stepped back into it, I realize what really makes a difference in someone's life and working with somebody, but also in your own life. And one thing that I've really noticed is a sense of communication that's really refreshing. I feel like I don't want to get into like communication as a topic too much because that's not why I sat down to talk about this kind of thing to begin with. But I realized that communication really is not that hard of a thing to do. It takes 2 seconds to open your mouth or shoot someone a message to let them know not just like how you feel for no reason, but also just to communicate what the plan is going forward and how you view something so that they don't interpret it the wrong way. And I think that communication is very important. I think that going back to work in Hoboken has showed me that it really does just take 2 seconds, literally, and that those 2 seconds can also be very impactful towards what you're doing. And I think working with Jabbar more so this week has taught me that that sense of communication is very important because he communicates in a way that other people at my other jobs don't really do, and I think that just comes with experience and knowledge, but kind of just sitting down and defining your own meaning of communication as well as what it means to other people. Um, but I don't want to get into that too much right now. Um, One other thing that I've been really happy with this week is how how I've been able to impact other people's lives, and that's something that I don't really say on a weekly basis, despite um, no matter how much I do, whether it be a lot or a little, for other people. And I say that because I've gotten a couple people jobs this week, just through connections and all that. But there's really two that kind of gave me insight because getting someone a job, that's just something that is a byproduct of what I built up in my lifetime through connections and also just being who I am and my character. But I think what's more important than sitting here and being like, "Oh, I got someone a job," is the lesson that you take from it and what you define that person to you as. And I gotta say, I could really talk about two of them, but one of them was one of my coworkers from my Hoboken job, where when I went back in, he mentioned needing something, and we called back up. He's an awesome person. We're around the same age. I think he's 18 and I'm 20. So we're around the same age, and he's just the the character growth that I've seen from him over the past year and a half that I've been working there, not including time skip, is really incredible. And I think that was evident like when I came back. I could tell you that he really did remember like everyone's name from my other job, like for real, asking about how everyone's been, how everyone that's important in my life has been. And that's something like a level of consideration and kindness that is not really so common. But what's funny is that I find that most of the people that I've worked with in my Hoboken job are like that. But it's really his growth because he's so much younger than most other people that I've seen over the course of the past couple of years. And I think that when I was thinking about it, because I think it's important to find like what that person means to you and how that came to be, is like when I first started working there, this was a while ago. This was right after I graduated high school in like 2024, probably like that June, that July, where I had come in every day, and as he's told me himself, he used to be much more of a loud person when it came to other people, and he was very quick to snap. And me coming in to work there, I always saw it. And to be honest, he kind of did scare me a little bit when I first got there, if I'm being real, because I would always work morning and he would always work night. So whenever we would swap places, I'd be like, yo, he used to come in with like speaker blasting, like, yo, what's up? And always like say something to me. And he was honestly like, I don't want to say terrifying, but I always just got like an impression of like, yo, this kid is really loud. And and then I found out that we were about the same age because he was 17 when I was 18 at that time. And all that to say that I don't really think he's changed so much over the years, or I don't think people like that change so much over the years, as much as it's important, as much as it's important to define their qualities from beginning to end. And the reason why I say I don't think he's changed so much over the years is exactly because of that. Because to me, when I first came in, and this is just me giving my opinion of it, but from my side of it, when when I first started working there and I saw this kid always be like that and kind of be always like snappy but loud, it was always like he got really loud and aggressive sometimes with people, but it was never for his own sake. Yeah, I mean, it was always like if we were working together and after we got cool, he would do this. Like if someone said something to me that was disrespectful, because Uber drivers are Uber drivers, but sometimes they would be disrespectful towards other employees or something like that, and he would always be the one to snap at them. And whereas most people would be like, all right, like this kid's very very loud and aggressive and even unprofessional to a degree at that time, it's like, all right, well, yeah, I remember he's also 17, 18, but also just realizing, to me at least, it's one thing to get aggressive with someone when they attack you personally, because that's normal. But he didn't even do that. And I think that obviously there's no real justification for someone always lashing out or being loud and kind of aggressive with people. But I do think that it's a little more justifiable when it's like not yourself, but someone else, like you're someone you care about getting upset with, because that means that you're rushing to defend someone else, and that's more noble than someone yelling at you and you lashing out on them. And once I realized, like, okay, this kid doesn't really get mad when people attack him, but he'll get mad when people attack the people that he cares about. Like, all right, he's not really as scary anymore, because that means that you could say something to him and have a conversation with him and disagree with him, and he won't get mad. You know what I mean? And that was my first thing in my mind, where I was like, all right, this kid isn't really as aggressive if you're talking to him. He just cares about the people around him to that degree where he's willing to like go out of his way and kind of get aggressive towards them, which again isn't the best thing, but it's something that's still noble to me nonetheless. And as time went on, um, what really made me change my opinion of him drastically was I realized that it wasn't that he was a bad person or he was a weird person, because I'm someone that at this point I think I do personally I personally think that I do a pretty good job of this distinguishing who's who's acting a different way and who's just carrying a lot on their shoulder. And I think at that point in my life, whether I realized it or not, I was like, okay, I categorize this person as not someone that is acting weird towards me or anyone in specific, but someone that just has a lot on their shoulder. And I'm not the type to sit here and pry on someone and ask them what's going on in their life if I'm not really that close to them, because I didn't know them that well. But I remember it was this one day we were sitting in the back, and he had told me a personal story, and I'm not gonna share that personal story obviously because I respect people's boundaries. When I sit down and I analyze things like this, even in my brain, or even just sit down and talk, it's like I'm not doing this to put anything negative or personal out into the world. I'm doing this to share my own thought process on something that I found positive in somebody else, or something positive that I see in life that I need to work on, or something negative about myself that I need to work on, as opposed to seeing the negative in other people. You know what I mean? I try to keep the negative to myself and not put that out there in the world. And I try to see the good in the world and put that into myself and also put it out there. You know what I mean? And I remember once he told me, came down the back. It was a really slow, quiet day, and he'd open up to me about this personal thing that was going on or had happened to him because I asked him how he got that job. He was like, "Yo, I got this job because this, and this, and boom, boom." And it was a super long story, but long story short, he got the job because his sister knew the manager at the time. And at that point, once he had told me like everything leading up to what had happened, I was like, "Yo, like that's crazy," but it also just shows that what I thought to be true was in fact true because that was the point where I realized like, all right, this kid's just shouldering a lot, and him just talking to me like that's taking the load off of his shoulders even just a little bit. And that story that he told me was a lot. You know what I mean? And I think that um, me helping him out is like when I help people out or when I try to go out of my way to do things for people, it's always based upon if I can do it, obviously, because I believe that if you can do something good for someone else, or I used to believe this with this one rule, but then I had another one. If you could do something good for someone else, then you should just do it, right? And I think that is a rule that I should still keep as my first, or anyone should keep as their first and foremost, like on a list. But I also now believe that as a second thing, you also have to kind of check the emotion that comes with it because even if it's free, nothing in life is truly free. You know what I mean? I think that even if it doesn't cost something materialistic, it can cost something emotional in your life, something that either adds or drains emotion from you. And once last week I was sitting there and I ran it by and I'm thinking about it because I had to define all this first because that's what really makes me want to do things for people is if I can sit there and think like, yo, is this person someone that's grateful? Is this person someone that would benefit off of it? Is this something that I can do and what is it going to cost me financially, emotionally? And I weigh all those factors because a lot of people in those situations will tell you that they feel bad, but it's like for me at least, when I do something for someone, I don't like when people say it because that implies that I haven't sat there and had that whole thought process of weighing every single little detail and figuring out like, yo, financially, what can I do? Emotionally, what can I do? And putting it together and just going from there. So after I sat there and I weighed it all out, I ended up connecting them, and yeah, that was it. And it really made me happy because genuinely from the bottom of my heart, like that's someone that I've seen grow for like the past year and a half. And I think that that story or like that growth that he's been on just shows that anybody can change from the moment that he told me that personal story to the moment that he had gotten off of that. And I think another example of what I realized in that moment was this week when I had went with someone who I also help out. It was during the big blizzard, and I woke up at 6 a.m. Boom, he told me to have a ride. We drove over to go somewhere. Cool, right? Then we drive back from 6 a.m. I picked them up. We went to the place at 7:30 a.m. Then when I came back, because it did feel like a bit of a waste, because a lot of people had canceled it because of the blizzard. I don't. I personally like I get it's a blizzard, but no matter what, I just hate when people cancel. Because if I'm going, then I think that there's no excuse for anyone else not to be. But I also recognize in my own mind space that that's like a selfish thought process. You know what I mean? So immediately, as soon as that enters my mind on like a day like that, on like Sunday or like anything, it's just like, all right, boom, I can't control the people, gotta move on with that. So it didn't change the fact that like kind of did feel like a waste of time a little bit to be honest, because so many people had already canceled in that moment. But we came back here at around 11, hung out here, we talked stuff that I want to get into, in a discussion like this. Um, and then when we went back, actually, he ended up helping me out with something, and we stayed afterward to just practice a sport. And when I was talking to him, I was giving him suggestions and tips. And like when I give suggestions and tips, my whole philosophy on helping with anything sport wise is like I know what works for me. I know what works for other people. I can tell you what would work for me and what would work for other people, but at the end of the day, only you know what works for you. And that's why I'm not really too pushy when it comes to stuff like that. But after all that was when he started talking to me and opening up to me. And we already gotten a little bit into like kind of opening up on that level in the middle, like when we came back here. But he had told me, he came up to me and he said, you know, I really appreciate it when you come up and talk to me about things like this, because I don't like when people turn around on a court and kind of say something like behind people's back. So I really appreciate that you could talk to me openly about this, because if there's something that I can do as an outside to get better, and this, he's older than me actually, he's 25, then I want to do that. So I told him, I was like, oh, really, what makes you sad? And he was like, when I'm playing a position in anything, or like when I'm doing a job, I always feel like that's what it is, a job. And if I'm not doing that job to its fullest extent, like when I go up and I'm not scoring or I'm not passing or I'm not doing something properly, it makes me like fold in on myself, not my teammates. Like I don't get mad at my teammates, I get mad at myself, and it makes me hate myself. And he was like, so when you tell me things like how to do this and that and open my mind up to new ways that I can do my job, I find it really helpful. And that's why I generally like, I appreciate everything that you've done for me up until this point, whether it be like driving me around or helping me out with money or volleyball or just anything. And that meant a lot to me. But I told him like my honest opinion of that is, I think that as people, because I don't like to limit things to just a court most of the time. I think as people, when situations like that happen where we feel like we're failing, most of the time we either take it out on the people around us and get aggressive, or we tend to take it inward and pour that hate onto ourselves. And we think that that's the only two options: either take it out on other people in situations like that where you're not succeeding, or take it out on yourself and just attack yourself. But in either situation, you're either going to get the people around you to hate you or yourself to hate you. And both are just equally as detrimental to yourself. And I feel like most people miss out on the third option of where to attack. And that's the problem. And I feel like when you attack the problem more than anything else around you, that's when stuff gets done quicker. And I think that it takes someone very mature to sit back and be like, okay, um, this isn't going to be impactful because it's going to push everyone else around me. This isn't going to be impactful because it's going to keep everyone around me, but I'm going to hate myself. But if I attack the problem instead, that's where stuff comes into play. And I told him that, and we ended up having a whole conversation off that. But I think that is what most people miss. And one thing that I noticed from both of those encounters was the fact that both people in the beginning felt really, I don't want to say bad about themselves, but like really hard on themselves from the very beginning. And most people, and I'm not now, I'm not even just talking about the two situations or like that I described, but I think that people as a whole, we do a really bad job of seeing someone give a cry for help and and actually giving them the help that they need. And what I mean by that is, I actually heard a good example of it the other day that I kind of, it stuck with me, but I kind of went into it a little more. Is like, as even as babies, like, or as adults, we some most people, or like people in general, we hear a baby cry and we just get annoyed and we kind of tell it like not to shut up, but we shush it. You know what I mean? Which is pretty much just a polite way of doing that. And I think that as people, we do that to the people who cry out for help all around us. Like as babies, we cry and we make loud noises. But as people, when we get older, it's not always that easy, because we develop our own mechanisms of being able to hide the way that we're struggling or our cries, right? And it's not that simple anymore, because everyone just doesn't go around crying or making noise. And I'm not saying that everyone should, but I do think that when people need a little bit of help, that you should help them if you have the chance. And even just to this day, I think that that's why a lot of us grow up with with problems like those, because like when we were younger, it's really it's really hard, because when we were younger, we were always told to shush or to be quiet, and we never learned like a proper way to deal with like what we're going through for most households, right? And I know that most people won't admit that, because everyone, as we grow older, just kind of lives like in this world of we're perfect, or like we would never do something like that if it's too outrageous. And I think that most of the time I do too. I get that way too. but it's not until the moments of when I'm around someone, and for example, like I honestly, even though it's rough sometimes, I admit the moments like where I'm and have negative emotions that make me feel embarrassed. And there have been times within, like, I think it was 2 years ago was like the most recentish one that I can remember, where someone around me was crying and I was like, damn, like I wish that person would just like shut up, like be quiet, you know what I mean? And I think that thinking back on that, like even in the moment, like you get that pull in your chest of like, that's wrong to say, because that's exactly how people grow up to be damaged and not be able to figure out things for themselves. That's how they are forced to develop mechanisms, right? And I think that in those moments, instead of wishing, or like I don't even want to say instead of, because it's a natural reaction, catch yourself and just immediately be like, all right, what I mean, like that's wrong, because at the end of the day, like everyone does have emotions, everyone does need to kind of just get it out sometimes. And if this person's really hurting that much, sometimes you got to pull over and help them. Like today, for example, I ended up driving someone somewhere, or my roommate somewhere, that was kind of last minute. But on my way back, I was pulling into a lot, and there was this older guy that was in a wheelchair, and obviously like it's a blizzard, so the lots are really full, so it's not like he could just pull off to the side, what I mean? It was like a path, and then that was it. So his son was shoveling off his car to the right, and the guy was in the middle. So I ended up just waiting there for like a minute or two, and I wasn't in a rush. Like whenever they were done was whenever they were done. But eventually, the son noticed, and he told his dad or grandfather to pull over to the side, and he shoveled him out of spot, and he was kind of like rushing to shovel it out. And I rolled down my window, and I reached my hand out, and I was like, "Oh, like I'm not in a rush. Like I'm on your time pretty much, because I'm not gonna. Who am I to rush someone in general? But like, who am I to also rush someone who's in a wheelchair? You know what I mean? Like, I'm on your time." So eventually the guy pulls over, and I'm waving at him like kind of nicely, because I really didn't want him to assume that, because I'm not someone that talks a lot. I don't want people to assume that I always have some type of negative emotion or negative thought or some negative type of play going on. So I've been trying to make a conscious effort at that. And so I waved at him as I was going by, and he waved back, and he started saying something as I was going by. So I rolled down my window, because it seemed like he wasn't saying anything harmful. He was just telling me to roll down my window. So I rolled down my window, and he started talking to me about how, well, first he did ask me for $1 a sandwich, because I was coming back from work. So I gave him a sandwich that I'd had, because I had a couple extra, because I usually take the leftovers if I'm able to. And so I gave it to him, and he was, God bless you. This has made my day. Da, da. And I told him, I was like, hey, bro, like, it's no problem. Like, we're all just human at the end of the day. Like, I'm just trying to drive through without disturbing you. And if I can help you out, yeah, bro, I got a bunch of food over here that like someone's gonna get, so I might as well just give it to you. And he was like, oh, like, I told him, I hope you have a great week. And he was like, oh, I am gonna have a blessed week. Like, this just made my entire week. Like, now I'm able to eat. And I asked him if that was his son shoveling out his car, and he said yeah. And he told me that he had paid all his car, and he ended up giving me like his whole life story. But sometimes that's just what it takes, to be honest. Like everyone's cry for help isn't always exactly the same, and as people, we need to do a better job than what we were raised around sometimes. And it doesn't happen to everyone, but sometimes people do go through that stuff of like, all right, now you're forced to quiet down your problems and develop mechanisms that you grow up to kind of hide your emotions from everyone else. And that's why everyone's problems are different, because everyone had a different upbringing. And this week it made me really happy that I was able to kind of help people out that were in need of that, you know what I mean? And I think when stuff like that happens, it's not even in my mind of like, I guess like an egocentric kind of way of looking at it, like, oh bro, I'm the GOAT, I just helped out so many people. It's like, bro, like I'm happy, not obviously about the fact that I helped them, but I'm more happy that I was able to sit down and just decipher what this person means to me, and articulate that to them, because life is short, and if you don't tell people exactly, not exactly, but how you feel about them in the given moment, then it's really hard to kind of get that time back. And so that was what made me the happiest, is just being able to articulate what someone meant to me, or multiple people meant to me, and then help them get further because of that. You know what I mean? And I think that that's something that